If you know someone who serves in the military, this next story will just hit you in the gut.
Yeah, David Cedergren, a sailor from South St. Paul, died in Iraq, not in combat, but because commanders ignored warnings, botched investigations, and failed to protect service members on their own base.
Cedergren's family in Minnesota was left with many questions, and only Mark Albert's investigation got them some answers.
These are the last known photographs of Dave Cedergren. They were taken just 48 hours before his death. As with all Navy medics, Cedergren's battle buddies called him Doc. He was trained to save lives and treat the casualties of combat while on patrol in Iraq. But despite his training, the 25-year-old from South St. Paul had no way to know that for him, neither the insurgent's bomb nor the sniper's bullet would be as deadly as simply taking a shower.
The first thing that I noticed was an arm sticking out of one of these showers. So the first thing we thought, okay, something's wrong here. Something's wrong.
Tony Stevens was the Marine who found Cedergren on September 11th, 2004, and gave him CPR.
He was in, I think, that one.
David was in this one?
Yeah.
The medic was cold, blue, and lifeless, lying on the chicken wire floor of this crude wooden shower at Camp Iskandariyah in central Iraq, all alone at 4 in the morning. He died in the dark. No one heard him scream. No one saw him fall. And yet seemingly everyone knew what killed him.
My number one thing was, could this be an electrocution? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, you know, when you're going there and you turn these valves and you're getting that tingly feeling, that shocking feeling, you know, that something bad here's happened.
Stevens says every day he and other Marines would roll the dice, trying to avoid showers that had just shocked someone. The gamble paid off for some, but not for others. And the military brass knew it. It took us 6 months to get the military's own investigative documents. Here they are, and here's what they show. That a Marine was burned so severely on his face and hands by electricity, he was sent out of Iraq. That when it rained, Marines would see sparks coming up from the ground around the base, with wires laying in puddles of water, and shocks in the shower that nearly knocked me out. Marines were emphatic that commanders had been told about the danger before Dave Cedergren's death. A logistic officer's tent even burned to the ground from an electrical fire. But instead of ordering repairs by competent electricians, commanders used older Iraqis for electrical work. Why older? One officer said, quote, "We figured if they lived that long, they probably had enough knowledge to at least survive." The showers were boarded up after Cedergren's death and never used again.
It shouldn't have been after a death. It should have just been after tingling. And then we wouldn't be here today talking about this. You know.
That would have been the honorable thing to do, is to fix it.
Right. If they know there's a problem, then it needed to be fixed.
Days after Dave Cedergren's death, the military concluded that the strapping 25-year-old died of natural causes, not electrocution. A previously undiagnosed heart problem, the military said. Case closed. When questioned, a top officer at the base said there was no effort to cover up the cause of death. It was reported appropriately, and we moved on, he said. The sad fact is that this was just one of many deaths.
That tells me that in the eyes of the commanders, he was just a number and a body, and he was gone, so let's replace him. Move on. So that tells me that from their point of view, he didn't have a lot of worth.
Bart Cedergren is Dave's father. He was a medic before his son became one too. Dave's sister Jody now works as a nurse at the Veterans Home in Minneapolis. Both know medicine, and neither they nor anyone in the family believed Dave died of natural causes. And they were right. 4 years after Tony Stevens used a poncho liner to retrieve Cedergren's body because he feared live electricity, the military amended the cause of death to include electrocution. It wasn't just natural causes after all.
To be told a lie and to be told that he died of natural causes, then he was sick, it just, how do you forgive that? How do you move on? And to this day, we still have never gotten a "I'm sorry." We don't even know all the facts yet.
Nobody has been accountable, and it's all been swept under the rug.
So we took the family's questions all the way to Baghdad, and we brought the Marine who tried to save Dave Cedergren's life here to Minnesota to meet the family for the first time. That part of the story when we come back.
Why do birds sing in the morning? Why do cats sleep in that warm little patch of sun? Why are these people driving through the desert, watching movies on dual monitors, listening to Sirius satellite radio, and using voice-activated navigation? Because they can, that's why. Just because they can.
Now get 0% APR financing for 60 months, plus a no extra charge DVD player on Dodge Grand Caravan.
Breezy Point Resort, Minnesota's favorite family resort, has new fun for everyone, including championship golf on 2 18-hole resort courses, the new Marina 2 restaurant and lakeside ballroom overlooking scenic Pelican Lake, and the new dockside lounge with our own Elvis tribute. New fun for family reunions, romantic packages, girlfriend getaways, weddings, and year-round ice skating. Plus the only Minnesota resort with all-inclusive golf and social packages. Breezy Point. We're half a tank of gas away. Visit breezypointresort.com.
Look, Dairy Queen has so many treats, it's getting pretty ridiculous. There's waffle bowl sundaes, moo lattes, peanut butter parfaits, banana splits, not to mention dozens of possible Blizzard flavors. How can one decide? The answer? Fate. Note to self, fate's a jerk. So many choices, all made with the one and only DQ soft serve and all made to tempt you.
5 Eyewitness News weather is presented by your local DQ and DQ Grill and Chill restaurant.
In the months before Minnesota naval sailor Dave Cedergren was electrocuted on a military base in Iraq, electrical shocks like the one that killed him were reported to higher-ups.
But the problems were not fixed. More people died. Mark Albert continues his investigation.
And you were the wonderful man that tried to save my son's life?
I did.
Hi.
Sure. Hey, nice to meet you.
We brought Tony Stevens from Tennessee, where he now lives, to Fort Snelling, where Cedergren is buried, to meet Dave's family.
Okay.
The military had refused to tell the family who was with their son when he died.
I promised I wouldn't cry.
There we go. And I was the one that performed CPR on him. If it was me laying there, like it was David laying there, I would want somebody to perform CPR on me.
Oh, definitely.
That's your brother in battle, so you know.
Sure.
I mean, that hits right at home because we know the next day it might be me.
I know the family sure appreciates the effort that you and the rest of the group did.
It's the first true answer we've gotten from somebody that was actually there.
I feel we were lied to. And I want someone to say I'm sorry. You know, just the simple words, I'm sorry.
In 2009, after a year of being pushed by Congress to investigate, the Defense Department Inspector General found Cedergren was one of 18 service members or contractors electrocuted in Iraq. In Cedergren's case, the Inspector General found, quote, none of the investigations determined who was responsible for erecting, wiring, or maintaining the shower facility. And therefore, no one has ever been blamed or held accountable for Cedergren's death.
Sir, do you believe that the Cedergren family is owed an apology?
While being a Navy man, I personally feel this loss pretty it really hits me. I don't know what occurred. I know that probably Task Force SAFE had been in existence. We probably would have been able to get that fixed. But
we talked with Navy Captain Russell Hughes from Baghdad. He's now in charge of the electrical safety program for all U.S. forces in Iraq, a program called Task Force SAFE. It's a job and a program that did not exist when Dave Cedergren died. It began 4 years later, in 2008, after an escalating number of electrocutions. Since then, Captain Hughes told us the team has brought in 6 dozen master electricians who have done more than 190,000 electrical inspections at U.S. bases across Iraq. Nearly a third of those inspections found violations, 1 out of every 3. More than 60,000 electrical defects in all. Just over half have now been fixed. The task force never got to Camp Iskandariyah, where Cedergren died, before the base closed early last year.
We are dedicated to making sure there's never again an electrocution in Iraq.
That dedication is exactly what the Cedergren family wishes had been there for Dave. If it had, they would have never seen this video.
A couple things that I'd like to say in case my family ever sees this family in Minnesota.
This farewell video was only to be played if Cedergren did not make it home. He almost did. Dave was due back in Minnesota for good just 3 weeks after his death.
I don't want him to die just in vain and that things don't get fixed or taken care of. I want to protect soldiers through him.
So nearly 6 years later, after investigations, inspections, and a Minnesota funeral, the central question is still unanswered. Who killed Doc? Who's responsible? And if nobody has been held accountable, who might be next?
We shouldn't have to worry about our soldiers taking a shower.
One reason it took us so long to report this story is because we had to fight for months to get these hundreds of pages of military reports. Many look like this. Information and names of those involved are blacked out. Even the name of Tony Stevens, who we found anyway. No one involved in the investigations of Dave Cedergren's death would talk to us on camera for tonight's story, including the Marines, who, in a one-sentence email this afternoon, told me no disciplinary action in this case is warranted. Dave Cedergren would have turned 31 years old on Saturday.
Mark, absolutely heartbreaking that men and women serving their country would be exposed to these kind of conditions. Has anyone else come forward with information on this?
They have, and we're going to have that part tomorrow night. We have a Marine who questioned their own death investigation, and we have reaction from members of Congress, and they are using very, very strong language in this case.
All right, Mark, thank you. Appreciate it. Well, David Cedergren's story continues as well on KSTP.com, and you can read once secret military reports, hear more with the captain now in charge of fixing the electrical problems, and more at KSTP.com.
5 Eyewitness News investigation found a Twin Cities sailor was electrocuted in Iraq because commanders failed to heed warnings to protect him and others, then botched the investigation into his death.
And since our investigation last night into Dave Cedergren's death, we've done more digging. We found that even the Marine Corps doubted its own report. Mark Albert took this strong reaction from current and former members of Congress.
Really looked forward to this. I don't know what to say. Other than thank you.
For nearly 6 years, the military has refused to tell Dave Cedergren's family the name of the Marine who tried to rescue their son.
And I was the one that performed CPR on him.
We found Tony Stevens in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and brought him to Minnesota to meet the Cedergren family for the first time.
It's been very hard.
It's the first true answer we've gotten from somebody that was actually there.
I feel we were lied to. And I want someone to say I'm sorry.
But they have not received an apology. For nearly a year, we fought to get more than 400 pages of military investigative documents. They show everyone knew of electrical problems at Cedergren's base, Camp Escandaria. Others had been shocked and hurt before the 25-year-old medic's death. But no one ordered the showers fixed by competent electricians or closed. And Cedergren died.
But I know of Marines that were shocked in those showers and that did report it to their next step in the chain of command.
They told somebody about it.
Right.
And it wasn't fixed.
Correct.
The Marine Corps' final investigation raised serious questions that still have not been answered. The death investigation, one Marine Lieutenant Colonel wrote, was not the best one I've ever seen. He continued to write, the issue is not so much whether or not the sailor was electrocuted, it is the perception that no one did anything about the problem. 17 other service members and contractors died before the military took action to fix 60,000 electrical defects across Iraq.
They would have been able to prevent this. Had they dealt with this the way that it should have been dealt, they would have prevented this. Young men would be alive today who are no longer with us.
Former U.S. Senator Norm Coleman is the member of Congress who pushed the military to reopen the Cedergren case. 4 years after the military told Dave's family he died only of natural causes. The military did reopen it and amended the cause of death to include electrocution.
Do they deserve an apology?
Yeah, they do. They do. And this country should say, we're sorry. We made a mistake. That's really the way this story should end.
We showed Congresswoman Betty McCollum, who represented Cedar Grin's South St. Paul area, what we found. She also thinks his death was preventable, telling us in a statement Cedar Grin was killed by, quote, a lethal level of negligence and incompetence. McCollum sharply questioned Defense Department officials about military electrocution deaths at a congressional hearing in 2008.
No one in our government was taking on the responsibility of making sure that the safety of our troops was being looked at and handled quickly. And in my opinion, that's just strictly deplorable.
Today, we renewed our request to speak on camera with those who were in charge at the time and who investigated Dave Cedar Grin's death. NCIS, which did 2 investigations and found there was no negligence, has now committed to an interview sometime in June. So we'll be heading to Washington to get some answers. Mark Albert, 5 Eyewitness News.
As a result of a 5 Eyewitness News investigation, the military has ordered an immediate change to the way the remains of service members killed on active duty are tracked.
Not just those killed in action in Iraq or Afghanistan, but for every death of a U.S. soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine worldwide.
Mark Albert has led our investigation into the death of a Minnesota sailor, now getting results for other families.
Dave Cedar Grin's tour in Iraq was almost over. The 25-year-old Navy medic from South St. Paul was due to be back in Minnesota in less than a month. During one of their last weeks on patrol, his platoon of Marines stopped at Camp Iskandariyah. They wanted to regroup, rest, and take a shower.
The first thing that I noticed was an arm sticking out of one of these showers.
Tony Stevens is the Marine who found Cedar Grin on September 11th, 2004, and gave him CPR. It didn't work. Dave was likely already gone.
My number one thing was, could this be an electrocution?
And it turned out it was. Cedar Grin had been electrocuted by a haphazard electrical system that had burned, injured, and shocked Marines in those very showers. But no one told any of that to Dave Cedar Grin's family. Not for 4 years.
I don't think the military realizes what we have gone through as a family. We've gone through hell.
There's absolutely no excuse.
The woman in charge of all criminal investigations of U.S. sailors and Marines across the globe is doing something she's never done publicly before. Susan Razor is admitting her agency, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, popularly known as NCIS, broke its own policies in a death investigation.
In retrospect, everybody could have done things different.
In fact, lots of things went wrong in Dave Cedar Grin's case right from the beginning. Razor says surging violence in central Iraq kept her investigator from getting to Camp Iskandariyah for 2 days after Dave Cedar Grin died. Then the NCIS investigator failed to share what he learned about the electrical hazards at the base with the agency in charge of actually determining what killed David Cedar Grin, the Armed Forces medical examiner.
We do have policy in place that states that the agent should communicate all the information from the death scene to the medical examiner.
Were those policies in place?
Absolutely, those policies were in place.
So someone didn't follow the policy?
That's correct.
And has there been any discipline for that person?
No, there hasn't.
Why not?
Well, again, given the circumstances, that were... The operational tempo was just such that I don't think that there was one person that could be held accountable for it. I mean, it was just an unfortunate series of events, the case being, reassigned to another agent and so forth and so on, and the pieces just weren't all put together.
Without those pieces, the Armed Forces medical examiner told the Cedar Grin family Dave's death was due solely to natural causes, specifically inflammation of the heart muscle. But that wasn't the only danger that day for Dave Cedar Grin. When he stepped into the base shower, the energetic athletic corpsman was struck by a surging jolt of uncontrolled electricity, strong enough to kill, the Marines later discovered. But the NCIS investigator at the base failed to tell the medical examiner about the widespread electrical problems, and the case was closed.
Does your agency owe the Cedar Grin family an apology?
I think that we owe the Cedar Grin family an apology for any pain that we caused as a result of what occurred during the investigation.
You're saying you're sorry?
Yes, I absolutely am sorry.
Do you accept her apology?
No, I do not.
You don't accept her apology?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't think she would have attempted to apologize if you hadn't asked her.
I feel grateful for her apology, but it's something that's a little too late.
When I first heard about it,
At least NCIS would answer all of our questions. The Armed Forces Medical Examiner, though, has been far less forthcoming about how it missed electrocution as part of the cause of death, how it overlooked Dave's electrical burns, why the Chief Medical Examiner, Captain Craig Malik, did not initially call the family or apologize, and why it still won't answer all of the Cedergren family's questions. In fact, the family only got Dave's new autopsy and death certificate after we started asking why they didn't have it. This is the Rockville, Maryland headquarters of the Armed Forces Medical Examiner. We tried for 2 months to get an on-camera interview with the Chief Medical Examiner or the director. Both refused. Their latest reason? They have an intense meeting schedule to get ready to move into new office space.
Clearly, somebody's priorities are screwed up. If there's more concern about moving into a new office than correcting a major mistake that their office made.
These are Dave Cedergren's two brothers.
They don't know it. It's almost like starting the funeral over again. You never know for sure if this is the final report.
Since our investigation first aired in May, Captain Malik has apologized to the Cedergren family in this letter for the delay in notifying them of the amended cause of death and for providing them the autopsy 2 years late. As a result of our stories, the medical examiner says it has made these changes. Now, when the agency makes a change to a service member's autopsy or cause of death, an automatic email will alert Captain Malik and his chief deputy to notify the family promptly and offer copies of the updated files. Dave Cedergren's family wonders why that was not in place a long time ago.
I can't find the words to express how disappointed I am more than anything else. It took us to come to you to get things to really happen.
Any of you here not confident that they're going to take steps to make sure all the other families are told?
I'm not confident.
I'm not.
No.
Well, if anything that we've experienced is an indication of how competent they are and how well that they can do their job outside of intense meetings about office space moving, I'm not at all confident.
Instructors at the NCIS Training Academy now use the Cedergren case to teach agents why it's so important to share information gathered in the field. One question, though, still haunts the Cedergren family. With all of the warnings about electrical problems at the base where Dave died, why weren't they fixed? The answer we got angered the Cedergren family and may frustrate you as well. Our investigation continues tomorrow night at 10.
All right, Mark, thanks so much.
And the story doesn't stop here. We have extensive coverage on our website. You can read some of the key documents in this case or watch our first 2 reports from May along with extended interviews. You can find it all at KSTP.com. Botched military investigation into the death of a Minnesota sailor has led to changes after a 5 Eyewitness News investigation uncovered what went wrong.
And now some prominent advocates for military families are wondering what took so long to fix the problem. Mark Albert has led our long investigation, our year-long investigation. You're here with some answers tonight.
Well, Dave Cedergren's death is a case study in how not to handle a death investigation. The military has now changed the way it tracks the remains of all U.S. service members killed anywhere in the world as a result of our story. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, is also sharing some blame and apologizing.
When Navy medic Dave Cedergren went to Camp Iskandariyah in central Iraq, the 25-year-old from South St. Paul likely had no clue he was walking into a death trap. He would die in the shower after being electrocuted.
They found basically the whole base was unsafe because of the electrical wiring.
That's correct. Not just the showers, the chow hall, the different areas on base as well.
It wasn't safe.
It was not safe.
But the NCIS investigator at the base never told any of that to the Armed Forces Medical Examiner, so the case was closed and ruled natural causes.
I think that we owe the Cedergren family an apology.
4 years later, when the medical examiner finally added electrocution to the autopsy and cause of death, it failed to fully notify the family of Dave Cedergren, or give them the updated files.
I was aware that it is difficult to get that information, and I'm very, very encouraged to hear that that has now been changed.
Bonnie Carroll is the founder of the group TAPS, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, based in Washington, D.C. It has helped 30,000 members of military families of the fallen, like the family of Dave Cedergren.
TAPS does regional survivor seminars.
Those families now have added protections after our investigation. Now, whenever a service member's autopsy or cause of death is changed, an automatic email will alert the military's chief medical examiner, Captain Craig Malik, to notify the family promptly and offer copies of the updated files.
We're seeing changes, we're seeing improvements, we're seeing upgrades. Many of them, in hindsight, you wonder, why wasn't this done a long time ago?
The family of Dave Cedergren wonders the exact same thing. Tonight at 10, see the next part in our investigation. Why hasn't anyone been held accountable for not fixing the electrical problems that had already shocked, injured, and burned Marines before Cedergren was electrocuted? And that is coming up tonight on 5 Eyewitness News at 10.
All right, we look forward to your report at 10, Mark. Year-long 5 Eyewitness News investigation into the death of a Minnesota sailor has already prompted changes in the U.S. military. Tonight, we push that investigation forward.
No one's been held accountable for the death of David Cedergren 6 years after he was electrocuted in the shower while serving in Iraq.
Mark Albert cuts through the military investigation filled with contradictions to get the Cedergren family some answers.
If anyone had the power to correct the problems that led to Dave Cedergren's death, it was this man, Marine Lieutenant Colonel Robert Durkin. He was the commander in charge of Camp Iskandariyah, a base in central Iraq where Cedergren had stopped for a few days in September 2004. Built next to a power plant, it was a base riddled with constant electrical problems. Some of Durkin's own Marines say he had the forewarning necessary to protect the men and women at his base.
All I know is our guys reported it to our chain of command.
Tony Stevens was a Marine stationed at that base. He feared the electricity could kill, and it would. And Navy medic Dave Cedergren of South St. Paul would die, probably where he least expected it.
They found basically the whole base was unsafe because of the electrical wiring.
That's correct. Not just the showers, the chow hall, the different areas on base as well.
It wasn't safe.
It was not safe.
Susan Razor is in charge of all criminal investigations of sailors and Marines worldwide. Her agency, NCIS, investigated Dave Cedergren's death. Her agents interviewed at least 6 Marines who said the electrical shocks, injuries, burns, and even a fire had been reported to commanders, including the Marine at the top, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Durkin. Command was aware of situation, one Marine wrote. The battalion commander addressed the issue, a Marine officer stated. And yet that battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Durkin, in his official statement, said he knew nothing about any electrical problems at his base hurting his Marines. In fact, when we first contacted him, he even denied that this was his statement. In it, Durkin said his discovery of the electrical problems came only after Dave Cedergren's death. Quote, "Nor did I hear of anyone else being shocked."
Do you believe him?
I don't know.
Do you think he should have known about these problems?
I think he should have known.
Despite the warnings, the briefings, the constant shocks, and the severe burns to at least one Marine who then had to be rushed out of Iraq for treatment, Lieutenant Colonel Durkin and his staff did not order the electrical system fixed by certified electricians, nor did they launch a base-wide safety inspection program. Durkin told investigators it was just too dangerous to bring American electricians to the base.
I don't see that there's criminal negligence present in this case, and I don't think there's anyone that can be held criminally accountable in the case.
Why is that?
I don't believe that there was anybody that intended to cause his death. I believe that action was taken, and in retrospect,
it wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough. But at the time, at the time that this occurred, I think that they took appropriate action by having the showers inspected on at least 2 occasions.
And that was appropriate action. Even though it didn't fix the problem, they kept getting shocks, injuries, burns, fires, sparks coming up from the ground when it rained. That was appropriate?
Well, again, in retrospect, they should have, shut down the showers until they could have had a certified electrician inspect them.
Mistakes are just not excusable.
Gary Solis has led Marines in battle. He's a retired Marine lieutenant colonel who was a company commander in Vietnam and teaches the law of war, first at West Point and now at Georgetown Law School.
Should the battalion commander have known about all of this stuff?
Absolutely. It's your job to take care of your men and women, and that extends to their circumstances like this, their well-being, how they shower, how they sleep, how they eat. That's your job as a commander.
In his career as a Marine Corps lawyer, Solis wrote and supervised hundreds of Marine death investigations. While he was not involved in Cedergren's case, we showed him some of the investigative documents and asked him for his opinion.
Do you find the statement from the battalion commander that he only discovered these problems after David Cedergren's death to be credible?
No. I would have no doubt that the battalion commander was well aware that there was a dangerous condition in those showers that represented a danger to his Marines.
And yet it wasn't fixed?
Apparently not.
And David Cedergren died?
That's for sure. The battalion commander failed in his responsibility to his Marines.
We showed that searing accusation to the mother of Dave Cedergren.
My son should be dead, and to hear that someone should have been responsible and wasn't doing what they should have, and that my son would still be alive and here.
So I have no problem understanding that we screw things up once in a while. We're human. We're all going to do it. What really just ticks me off is that the guy doesn't have enough balls to literally come out and say, hey, we made a mistake, and to say it quickly. The guy failed to have enough honor to admit his mistake and take whatever he was going to have to take for it and allow things to move on.
It's pathetic. It's a slap in the face for the Marine Corps.
Brad Cedergren, Dave's brother, is a first lieutenant in the Minnesota Army National Guard. He's been told to prepare for a possible deployment to the Persian Gulf next year, 6.5 years after his brother died there.
Your life is going to depend next year probably on a battalion commander, isn't it?
Probably. And I would not want this battalion commander as my battalion commander.
Can you understand the family's frustration that you haven't found that one person?
I can certainly understand the family's frustration. I'm the mother of a soldier that has done an Iraq tour, and he's currently in Afghanistan. And if I were in this situation, I would understand completely what the family is feeling. But I do not believe that there is anybody that can be held accountable for the electricity issue in the showers.
Would you want your son in Iraq or Afghanistan to use these showers? No,
absolutely not.
You wouldn't?
Absolutely not.
The Marine Corps says its investigation found that no one should be disciplined for Dave Cedergren's death. It was an investigation run by someone the base commander, Robert Durkin, appointed, signed by Durkin when it was done, and conducted on the base Durkin commanded. 3 senior officers also signed off on those findings. We did work for nearly 3 months to get an interview with Durkin. He refused or ignored our requests. And since his command at the base where Dave Cedergren died, Durkin has now been promoted to full colonel.
All right. Mark, thank you.
And the story doesn't end here. Watch all 4 parts of our year-long investigation and read the key documents in this case. You can find it all on our website at KSTP.com.
The electrocution of a Minnesota sailor while serving in Iraq sparked a criminal probe, and it was a subject of a Peabody Award-winning 5 Eyewitness News investigation. And now, the brother of David Cedergren is deploying in the same war that his brother died in.
5 Eyewitness News reporter Mark Albert was there as the family watched another son go off to war.
And soldiers of the 1st Battalion, 194th Armored.
It's all become so familiar, the cheers, the speeches, the goodbyes.
To the families and friends gathered here today.
If deployments were measured by the number of sacrifices made by the families, the Cedargrens could start counting and never stop.
I lost us already in Iraq.
Navy medic David Cedargren was electrocuted in the shower in 2004 while serving in Iraq. But the military didn't tell his family that for 4 years, instead initially finding Dave died solely of natural causes. A 5 Eyewitness News investigation last year exposed the ignored warnings, botched investigations, and failures that did not protect Cedargren or other troops. As a result of our series, the military changed the way the remains of service members killed worldwide are tracked, and NCIS apologized.
You're saying you're sorry?
Yes, I absolutely am sorry.
Now, nearly 7 years and a burial later, the Cedargrens are sacrificing once again.
Is that Daddy? Are you proud of Daddy, honey?
Praying for Brad Cedargren's safe return.
Pray to God. I know that God wouldn't do this to us again. I gotta have the faith that God wouldn't do this to us again.
Brad will be holding on to faith too, as a battalion chaplain.
My job is to provide ministry to soldiers going to war.
The 35-year-old father of 2
I won't get to do the things I do with him.
will be walking in his brother's footsteps. Dave tended to physical wounds, Brad the spiritual and emotional. And Brad intends to finish what his brother could not.
My goal is to come back home. And so for me to complete that goal of mine, I think we'll honor him, we'll allow my family to be at a little more ease.
If I dwell on it, it's just going to make it an even longer year. So I just have to trust that it's going to be fine. He's going to be okay, and he's going to come home.
Watch over us wherever we go.
And on this day, as more Minnesota soldiers headed off to war,
Defend us, waking and sleeping.
Brad Cedargren's benediction seemed written not only for them, but for a family whose pain cannot be measured.
Light our way in the darkness, shelter us in the heat of the day and the weariness of travel. Be with us at every step and at every mile. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. God bless you, Brad.
Thank you, Joe.
Some of the Cedargrens visited Dave's grave yesterday at Fort Snelling. It was his birthday. Dave would have been 32 years old. There are 24 deployment ceremonies this month and next across Minnesota. The 2,400 soldiers will train in Fort McCoy, Wisconsin until mid-July, when they'll leave for nearly a year in Kuwait. Our thoughts are with them.
Yeah.
And Brad didn't become a chaplain until after his brother's death.
After he had served in the Navy, and then he joined the Army, and then when he decided to join the National Guard, he said that he later felt a calling, and so this will be his first overseas deployment as a chaplain. And obviously, we wish him all the
whole
best.
family the best.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, Mark.
Well, if you want to watch our Peabody Award-winning investigation into the electrocution death of Dave Cedargren, go to our investigations page at KSTP.com.